hear the last case that we have before us this evening, which is 342 Nassau Street. That's block 3401, lot 14 in the RO zone and the Jugtown Historic District. Where is the case number? Why can't I find it?
I don't have the number.
Yes, it has the following case number, Z1616352UV. And what I will ask is Mr. Bridger to read the essence of his memo, and then Mr. Tarr will take the floor and overwhelm us.
Mr. Bridger, before you start, I'll just indicate for the record that the noticing is in order and the board has jurisdiction to hear the application.
Thank you. Good evening. The applicant, Eastridge Design Ltd., is seeking a use variance and minor site plan approval to permit a retail use where such use is not permitted. Excuse me. It's pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-71. A D1 variance is required when a use or principal structure in a district is restricted against such use. The applicant is seeking approval to permit the establishment of a retail use on the first floor. The current use is an interior design office, and there's a two-story residential apartment as you face the building to the left. Property is located at the northwest corner of Nassau Street and Harrison Street. The lot contains 5,904 square feet and is located in the RO zone. The adjacent properties are commercial office buildings, restaurants, grocery store, real estate office, joint occupancy buildings, and single-family uses. The applicant seeking variance relief to permit a sales room in the existing first floor front room. It'll be a 20 by 20 room. The space currently serves as a showroom for the interior design business. No internal or external alterations are required. The applicant is not proposing any site improvements, although there's a technical requirement for a site plan. That was all done administratively as a minor site plan. It was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission, at which time they installed a new awning, reconfigured the rear porch, replaced the front stoop to the apartments. They added new sidewalks, landscaping, and along the parking area. And as far as the zoning, a conditional use and site plan authorization was granted in 1979 to permit the conversion of what at that time was an existing two-family dwelling into its current configuration. A D1 use variance similar to this was granted in 2003 to permit an interior design firm to utilize the front showroom for retail space, retail sales. I have attached the findings of fact to both of these cases to this memo. The use variance relates to that it's not permitted on this site. They need a D1 use variance. The parking complies. Applicant should address the number of employees on site and the amount of traffic to be generated by the office in the proposed retail use. The retail use is not a permitted use in the RO zone, so there's no parking standard. The previous variance permitting retail use utilize Section 17A279, which provides the following: for any permitted building and uses for which no other requirements are set forth, the appropriate and comparable off-street parking requirements shall be determined by the planning board, taking into consideration the amount of traffic to be generated thereby and the likelihood of all-day or short-term use of the parking spaces. For comparison's sake, the parking requirement for retail in the adjoining NB use is one space for every 300 square feet on the ground floor and one space for every 450 square feet on other floors. The application notes a request for a setback variance for a trash enclosure to be permitted closer than the required 5-foot setback. The applicant has submitted a survey that indicates the trash enclosure complies with the 5-foot setback and the variance is no longer required. The D1 variance must be considered under the following manner. No variance or other relief may be granted under the terms of this section unless such variance or other relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. following items should be considered when reviewing the use variance. The burden of proof, the applicant has the burden of demonstrating special reasons for granting of the variance, as well as the negative criteria, and special reasons may be found where the proposed use inherently serves the public good, such as a school, hospital, or public housing, where the owner would suffer undue hardship if required to use the property in compliance with the permitted uses in the zone, and where the use would serve the general welfare because the proposed site is particularly suited to the proposed use. As you all are aware, there is a requirement of a supermajority for a use variance, which requires 5 affirmative votes. That's my summary. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Bridger? No. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Mr. Tarr.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps we could all be sworn. Katie Eastridge is on my left, Jim Kamal, the engineer, is to my right, and Elizabeth McKenzie, the planner, is in the first row, if we could be sworn.
All right, if you'd all raise your right hand, do you all swear that any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. And all the paperwork is completed properly?
I think I do.
Good. So we can take jurisdiction. Okay.
What I find fascinating about this case is that back in 2003, the Borough Zoning Board, this board, granted an interior designer who occupied the building a use variance for this very purpose, to use the 20 by 20 square foot room down on the first floor for retail sales in conjunction with that fellow's interior design business. What you did, though, that was a little unusual, was to limit that variance to his business and his business only. The Borough Board did that a few times over the years. In my experience, it's not the common practice. Variances tend to run with the land. And here we have an interior designer who wants to do exactly the same thing that the fellow did in 2003, but there was an intervening office use of the building, and so Mr. Bridger's not in a position, given the way the resolution was drawn, to simply say that it was permitted in the same way that the last fellow was. So I find that interesting. Nevertheless, we'll now proceed. Mr. Jim Kamalik is a professional engineer licensed in New Jersey who has appeared here before. He prepared the drawings, and I'd ask that he be accepted as an expert in civil engineering.
Certainly.
Spell your name for the record, please.
Sure. James Kamalak, C-H-M-I-E-L-A-K, with Kensho Resources here in Princeton.
And, sir, are you a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone. We'd like to take a few minutes
Bring
just
the
to...
microphone a little closer so that I can hear and it will be recorded.
We'd like to take a few minutes just to go over the property location and the site conditions. We've included on the slides, as you can see above, a key map which highlights the property in blue. It's located on the west corner of Harrison Street and Nassau Street. It's an existing historic building in the historic district, and you can see the location by the blue arrow. Also, this property is located in the RO zone, and you can see that the adjacent zones are the neighborhood business and the R3 that are separated by roadways and intervening lots. This key map is included on your plans as well. Secondly, on slide number 3, we've included the overall view of this property on the west corner. And in particular, you can see the subject building highlighted in yellow at the corner of Harrison Street and Nassau Street. And you can see that this particular property is smaller than the surrounding properties and contains the existing historic structure, as well as the parking lot to the rear and landscaping, sidewalk, and porch along the frontage on Nassau Street. This application does not propose any construction activities or substantial disturbance. The intention here is to continue the use that was previously undertaken in the same general context, but obtain the use variance necessary to do that. At the rear of the building, you can see on the exhibit the existing parking lot, which is accessed by Harrison Street. And if I go to slide 4, this lot view, you can see the 7 existing parking stalls, which in terms of the number of stalls do comply with the ordinance requirement based on the uses within the building and the floor area. And there is an access driveway from Harrison Street to this parking lot. And the parking lot will remain as gravel. And as Mr. Bridger said previously, there have been some site enhancements to the property that have enhanced the landscaping, some of the walkways, and also included a nicely fenced-in trash and recycling enclosure, which is in the lower left-hand corner, if you're looking at this particular slide of the existing building, to efficiently screen the trash cans. And that's also surrounded by landscaping in a nice manner. If you've been out to the site and have seen it, it looks very nice. To conclude that, the review of these minor site enhancements were reviewed by HPC, and the HPC review officer did review the compliance plan pursuant to the December 2015 resolution to comply with the conditions of that approval relative to the HPC review in the context of a minor site plan. So a lot of the site review and details of those minor enhancements have already been evaluated, reviewed, and complied with. And really, we're not here to address any additional improvements. So from an engineering standpoint, I really don't have that much more to say, but we did want to introduce the overall lot, the configuration, how the building sits on the property, as you can see on this slide. And I think it's important to point out the various setbacks that exist, which are part of the application. Relative to the variance relief, we have a side yard setback, a minimum existing non-conforming condition of 1.6 feet, the front yard setback of 10.2 feet, and the side yard setback at 5.1 feet. So the red dashed line shows what the ordinance required setbacks are, and this is just a condition, an existing condition that the property owner just has to deal with, which will be further addressed by our planner in a few minutes.
Could I just ask you one question before you take that one off? Is there a handicapped entrance to the building?
No, there isn't.
No. Okay.
Okay?
You want to consider this Exhibit A1?
That would be fine, thank you. The all 4 slides, and we'll give a copy to staff. So we'd like to move on. Mrs. Eastridge has been sworn. I've asked her just to give some background about her practice here in Princeton, what goes on upstairs with staff, and what she proposes in this room downstairs, number of employees, the hours that the facility might be open, and things of that sort.
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Katie Eastridge. I'm an interior designer, and my practice has been in Princeton, New Jersey for 28 years. We have enjoyed leasing properties on both Tulane Street and Nassau Street, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to participate in Princeton's history by purchasing the building at 342 Nassau. I'm proud to say that I'm now a steward of a building from 1735, and it's been my intention since the beginning of the purchase to take care of the building and let the next generations make any changes that I have no intention of making. Our interior design practice is small. We do residential interior design. There are 2 of us that work upstairs and 1 person that is downstairs. The building is, it doesn't really afford many more people working there than just that. It's an incredibly small room. The first floor that we would enjoy having a retail showroom allows for a couple of sofas, a dining table or 2, art on the wall, and an opportunity for us to visually explain to our customers what it is that we're capable of doing.
Great. You're not
Thank you.
open all the time? The hours?
Our hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5, or by appointment. Since I've been there, we've had a couple of people drop by every afternoon at best. I can't imagine that we're looking for more than that. Just an opportunity to explain to potential or old customers what it is that we do.
Questions?
I guess just, where did you do this activity that you plan to do downstairs? Or where do you do it now?
What do we do with downstairs now?
I imagine you do some retail,
Not now.
not at all.
I'm waiting
just-
until potentially I have approval. Am I answering correctly?
Sure. But there are couches and chairs
Oh, we have,
downstairs.
yes. Downstairs right now, it's furnished like a living room. And there's a sofa, dining table, a few napkins. Is that clear?
You oftentimes go out to people's homes.
Most of our practice is going to customers' homes. Is that the right answer? Is that the answer?
It was a simple question.
Okay.
The answer
I've never done this
The answer
before.
was more complicated than the question.
Okay, sorry.
Go to the next slide. All right, so I mentioned earlier that in 2003, the Borough Board gave Mr. Evans, the fellow with the Tuscan Hills interior design facility in that building, the approval that you see on the screen. The second floor in his case was office. The first floor was to be a showroom. He proposed no changes to the building. There were then and there are now 7 parking spaces. Linda Carnival, who had used it before that as a real estate office, testified in 2003 that she thought that it would be a less intense use than her real estate office. And the number 13 there, Lucky 13, was the one where you restricted it to his use and his use only and not to go into the future. And so that's the facts with respect to the building and with respect to the use. We have the responsibility to go through the criteria from the ordinance, and to do that, we've asked Elizabeth McKenzie to act as our planner and to give testimony on that basis. So she'll come forward and we'll talk about her credentials.
There is an easel over there if you want to.
Okay, or
Use
if you
that.
want to look behind you, it's the same
They
thing.
have screens in front.
So you have a choice as to where you want to look. I can sit here if that's easier.
Anywhere you
that
want,
way,
anywhere you like.
That way you can stay there. Do you want to qualify me first?
You just tell them all about it.
Okay. I'm Elizabeth, middle initial C, McKenzie, M-C-K-E-N-Z-I-E. I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. My office is located at 9 Main Street in Flemington, New Jersey. I have appeared before this board in the not too distant past on the Blue Point Grill application, at which time I think you accepted me as an expert, but if you would like, for brevity's sake, to put a copy of my curriculum vitae in on the record.
Certainly, you can do that. We will accept you, as we did previously.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Like this Exhibit A2?
Who it is?
Okay.
In any case, just to briefly summarize, I do provide planning services both to municipal clients and also to applicants appearing before boards, as in this case. I don't know if you need more than that on the record. My license is current, and I have national certification through the American Institute of Certified Planners.
We asked you to be qualified, Mr. Chairman.
I think
Is
you
that
said
all right,
it was.
Mr. Royce? Is that all right?
Yes,
Good.
yes.
There we go.
Once accepted, you can keep on coming back.
We're off.
Okay. Thank you very much. You've already had from Mr. Schmelik a description of the property and where it's located. If you look at the aerial photograph that is mounted both behind you and also on the graphic display that I have, you can see the property in relation to other properties. Just to fill in what Mr. Bridger described as the surrounding land uses, what struck me about the uses immediately around this intersection was the predominance of design professionals, architects, interior designers, and also real estate offices, which seem to be hovering around the corner. And then there are also other uses as you move a little bit further away. You have Merrill Lynch, you have a medical office, you've got the firehouse, you have residential uses really on both sides of Nassau Street, extending west of the subject property. Sorry, it's on the west side.
There's also a public parking lot.
Yes. So you have, and then you have over in the area further to the east of the subject property, you have the health food store, and you have a lot of more retail characteristic uses, but this is an area where you have a concentration of design professionals. I think that there's a reason for that. The buildings in this area, both the residential buildings in the R3 zone, and then as you get to the RO zone, are really lovely old homes that are characteristic, that are the reason this is the Jugtown Historic District. And for that reason, they tend to attract people who are willing to have spaces divided up into small offices and to deal with, an older home, and they like the charm and attractiveness of the older home. So it works for those kinds of offices. And for that reason, I think my client was attracted to this particular building, which was erected in the 1730s. I think what's important about this application is that the use that my client is making of the non-residential portion of what is a joint occupancy building, because it has an apartment that is located just on the west side and is sort of an annex to the building. And then there is the main part of the building is used for her use. Is that it's primarily an interior designer's office. What she's contemplating and what is proposed in this case is to be able to have on the first floor an interior design showroom where clients coming in can get a taste of what her taste is and get a sense of the kind of work she does. The furniture, I was in there today, and the furniture is grouped very tastefully as a sort of dining area and a couple of living area spaces. It doesn't appear like a retail store. There are not racks. There is nothing about it that would suggest or that is even proposed to be anything different from really a sort of living room type gallery setting to show off what she does. But the items that are in there would be available for sale to clients who, like that mirror or like that particular couch and want to purchase it. And that's the reason for asking permission. The RO zone in which this property is located is a residence office zone. It is clearly the intention of Princeton not to allow retail uses, typical retail uses in the RO zone. And I would have a hard time coming before you and saying we want something that is a very typical retail use with a counter and shelves and traffic coming in and out throughout the day. That's not the intention here. This is really ancillary to the interior design office that my client runs. And it's something that is sort of an enhancement of that office and supports the office, as opposed to a more traditional retail use where you have a very tiny office and you have primarily retail sales, and the very small office supports the retail sales. In this case, it's decidedly the opposite. You have the space on the first floor that will show off some of what she does and the kinds of styles that she chooses, but the office is the main practice within the building and will continue to be so. The area that we're talking about is roughly 20 by 20 feet. It's sort of divided by a wall that comes out, so it lends itself to arranging sort of 3 separate room areas as part of that space, and that's how it appears. But the benefit of this is that there will be the ability for people who want to wander in. They see it's a design professional. If they wander in, they will be able to get a sense of what she does, and it will also allow the fact that they have to have somebody on the first floor to receive people that come in. It will give that person a function in showing people things, and if they're interested in buying them and completing those transactions. The property that we're dealing with has a number of deviations with respect to the placement of the existing building. It's oversized for the minimum lot size requirement in the RO zone, but because of the placement of the home, which was built in the 1730s, it does not meet side yard setbacks. That's in part a function of the fact that the road, North Harrison Street, was widened after this house was built, and in fact the annex that's now on the west side used to be on the east side. And the house also sits 10.2 feet off Nassau Street. So there are some existing deviations associated with the lot coverage, the building coverage rather, the building height, the floor area ratio, all of those parameters are met. So the lot is not in any way overbuilt. We do need C variances for the existing setback deviations, but I think they can easily be justified as C1 variances, and the only way to cure them would be the removal of the existing building or the relocation of the existing building, and given its presence in an historic district, I think that would do more harm than good to the neighborhood and to the intent and purpose of your zone plan. So that is the testimony I'm going to offer you on the C variances. We have no other new variances, C variances, or design waivers. All we have is the D variance to allow the designer showroom because of the terms and conditions of that resolution from 2003 that you saw that specifically state that the variance that was previously granted for a showroom was limited to that particular professional's use of the space. In this, I have to say that looking at your intentions for the RO zone, and looking at the criteria that we have to satisfy with respect to granting a D variance, we have to demonstrate that there are special reasons that justify granting the variance in this particular case, which I'll get to in a moment. But we also have to deal with the negative criteria, the effect of granting the variance on the intent and purpose of your zone plan and zoning ordinance. And also we have the enhanced burden of proof imposed by the Medici decision, wherein there's a presumption that if a use has been consistently not permitted under the zoning ordinance, that is an intentional omission of that use from the list of those permitted in the zone. There's no question in my mind that the RO zone is not intended for retail uses, in large measure because it encompasses a lot of historic buildings, and there's a recognition that maybe those historic buildings are located in an area with a more commercial atmosphere, so the office uses are allowed, but the intention is not to have an expansion of sort of the retail nodes that are located along Nassau Street. That is very clear, but I think in this particular case, if we look at the nature of the showroom use that is contemplated, it's quite limited, and it's clearly ancillary and accessory to the use of the premises for an interior designer. It is not intended to be a separate or independent retail use. In fact, we're not asking for retail use as a sort of broad category. We are asking to have a designer showroom that does allow items to be sold if people are interested in buying them. But I looked at your provision in your 2003 resolution, which limited it to the particular property owner, and it occurred to me that that was an action on the part of the board which, while somewhat irregular in the use variance world, made sense, I think, from the board's perspective in the desire not to have, over time and with changes in occupancy of the building, not to have something that was granted as a very limited type of retail or showroom activity in connection with a design professional's office, not to have that morph over changes in occupancy into something that really was an independent retail use. And so I could understand the board's taking that position, and I think that we can achieve that in this case by simply carefully describing what is contemplated and the fact that it is clearly ancillary and accessory to having an interior designer's office on the premises, that it would be a showroom associated with that. And I think you can achieve the same kind of objective and make it clearly enforceable by the zoning officer. I think that fear that might have motivated that original condition can probably be overcome in another way, but nevertheless, I think that's why we're here tonight. You want to know that whatever we're doing here doesn't go far from what you had originally approved, or is in fact exactly what you had originally approved in 2003. And I was sympathetic to that because it's often something a board wrestles with in terms of something getting out of hand over a period of time. I think that in terms of the special reasons that justify granting the variance in this case, we do have a number of purposes of the municipal land use law that I think are promoted by granting the variance. I would cite specifically purpose A, which talks about promoting or encouraging municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner that promotes the public health, safety, and general welfare. And I would venture to say that as your ordinance provides, this site in particular is a very appropriate site for a design professional, and that this proposed use would be accessory to that and would support the appropriate use of this property for a low-intensity type of office use. And I think that that's important because it is at a busy intersection. So I think having it the same low-intensity office use that's contemplated in this case that the applicant actually has on the site is appropriate. Purpose G talks about providing sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, including commercial uses. But again, that goes to the appropriateness of this particular site for exactly the use that is contemplated here. And Purpose I talks about promoting a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangements. We're not proposing any changes to an historic building other than the site improvements that were already previously, and by the way, unanimously approved by the Historic Preservation Commission to upgrade the site, to change the, instead of having concrete walkways, to have herringbone brick and bluestone walkways and steps and things of that nature.
Are you saying there will be no signage on the building?
The signage that's on the building is the signage that is already on the building.
That won't change?
That will not change.
Okay.
No additional, there's nothing going to be advertising items for sale, store, none of that will be there. It just the signage that is currently
Just an
there on the
address
building will
and a-
remain. Yes, exactly.
I'll add that there's no signage with respect to retail sales, but there's, the HPC is approved and we're waiting for a sign permit for a ground-mounted sign. At the
Excuse me,
corner.
I stand corrected. That sign hasn't been installed. All of the other improvements are in, but that sign that was approved by HPC has not yet been installed, but all it is an identification sign. It's not, it has nothing to do with, items for sale or anything. That's, the way that my client proposes to handle the sales is really to have just, very discreetly hidden prices on things and And also, there will be no cash register. There's just a little card reader. I mean, it's pretty nondescript.
Do we have a copy of that sign that's been approved?
Yeah.
I probably
Got it?
have a
Sign?
copy of it if you want from my file.
The sign? I think we've got it on the screen. I think we have a slide of it.
Okay.
There it is. Okay.
Eastridge Design Home.
Okay, that's on the site drawings, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'll make that Exhibit A4, or it's within the,
It's within the slide set.
is the aerial exhibit that, that's all part of the Paris?
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, the other purpose is Purpose J, which talks about preservation of historic sites. I think what is contemplated here is entirely, in terms of the use that is occupying the building, is entirely consistent with the historic district as well as with the RO zone, with the only provision being the permission the applicant is seeking to be able to sell some of the items that she's displaying for customers to see. In terms of the negative criteria, I've already talked to you about what I think are the intentions of the RO zone, why this was limited to one particular applicant in the past, and the fact that I think we can achieve those objectives with this application. And I think that is an indication that we will not be violating the governing body's intent with respect to the RO zone, and thereby we're satisfying the enhanced burden of proof with respect to the Medici decision. I don't think there's going to be any detriment to the public good if the variance is granted. This site will remain exactly as it looks today, with the exception of the sign, which has not yet been installed. Thank you for correcting me on that. So I think on balance, the granting of this variance satisfies the statutory criteria for granting a D variance, and the applicant is willing to have the record reflect the nature of the use and the fact that it is ancillary to the interior design business.
Not to beat the sign up here, but do we have that in our package, or you just have it on the screen?
The sign was part of the HPC submission, so I do have it on the screen, but if you'd like to see it on a sheet, I can provide that as well.
We'd like to see
Yeah.
it. It's not in the sheets that we were provided. It's an interesting procedural process we've been through. We had an administrative approval, an HPC review of all of the exterior changes which have already occurred, that this application is characterized as a site plan and use variance, but only because a use variance in a commercial building in Princeton must also be a site plan. We're not doing any site plan work. It's a site plan application with no work. All of the things you see there were approved by HPC. That's fine. Where do you have the site? Do you have the sign located on your site drawing?
Yeah, you can see it on the HPC plan, SL1, which is on the screen.
Because I don't see it on the site drawing.
Where is it?
It's the dark line on the plans that are up there.
Your cursor. Okay. Yeah, it should have been part of the package to us, but yeah, it's right here. Oh, okay. Here it is. So you are doing additional...
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
So that solid, in the detail view, the lower right-hand corner, that solid black short line in the front of the building, that's the sign.
Correct.
And it is located outside of the site triangle at that location.
These drawings show the sign and the location. It should have been part of the package to us.
Yeah, and I think it was...
Also doing landscaping work, too.
Use the cursor on the computer, you can highlight the location on the slide you've got up at the moment. Is there a cursor?
I'm just
that
not
you can-
sure how to make the cursor work. I'm trying, but
Won't go. Okay.
yeah, it's not working.
But it's obvious where it is.
But it's in that lower right-hand corner, that heavy black line
Yeah.
there.
It's exactly parallel to Nassau Street. There's one other point I want to mention in my testimony that I neglected to mention, and it was brought up in Mr. Bridger's report, and that is the issue of parking, on whether this, proposed designer showroom might, create a need for more parking. Right now, we have 7 parking spaces on the site. We meet the requirements for the office use and for the residential apartment space that is in the annex. And in addition, we have sufficient parking so that even if you treated this as a full retail space, which we're not asking you to do, but even if you were to, we would have sufficient parking. There will be, in connection with the business itself, not more than 3 people associated with the business, 2 upstairs and 1 down, and then 2 spaces are required for the dwellings. We actually, only on a day-to-day basis, only 5 spaces are required. There are 7 spaces on the site.
But there is also a public parking space across Nassau Street.
That is correct.
Behind the graves.
That is true. That is correct. But even without using that, we have the space on site.
Yeah. Okay.
Any questions of the planner?
We have the audience. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this case? Are you here to address this case at all, or just out of curiosity?
Oh, we can have a bed and breakfast.
Okay.
The one on Cherry Hill Road that carried.
Different case.
Sorry?
They're here for a different case, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nobody here to speak.
No.
That's it.
That's it. To me, the number 13 is the only one that's unusual. I think we've made the case to continue a use that had previously taken place within the space.
You would like this to continue with the building rather than, as I did last time, have only
Well,
one.
this cost thousands of dollars and lots of time, and it's the way the borough did its business, but it's contrary to what Cox and others tell us we normally do. And so there are other cases that are going to come before you that will uncover some old practices. It won't affect Ms. Eastridge. It's just maybe good practice if you thought about it. If you don't want to do it, it's not going to hurt her. But we would like you to approve the use, the retail use. And thank you.
Mr. Tarr, question for you in terms of the conditions placed on any board approval. The resolution from 2003 describes this as a variance for the specific occupancy of the first floor of the joint occupancy built by low-intensity interior design showroom for the retail sales of, and then it explains textiles, I assume, furniture, with no structural alterations or exterior changes, hours of operation. This says 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday, with the showroom to be closed on Sundays and Mondays. I believe your client testified actually her hours are 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm not sure if that matters to the board or not. But I'm assuming that from your client's perspective, those conditions are acceptable to approval that might be forthcoming tonight.
Sure. This fella had limited hours. She has limited hours. Limited type of retail sales, limited type of retail sales. It's astonishing, but it's almost exactly the same as it was in 2003.
I don't disagree that it would be typical that a use variance would run with the land. So that's why I was asking questions about what conditions would you put on it so that were the property to be sold, it would be clear what's permitted out there and what is not, so that if it changes hands, there aren't too many uses that would be similar to an interior design. I suppose anyone could try and argue what their, whatever their use is.
The historic district doesn't put constraints on immediately?
Not
necessarily.
Not on the interior use. I mean, the representation is that they have come to HPC and have received approval for the
I
exterior.
mean, the
so-
approval we're being asked for seems to be fairly trivial from the viewpoint of zoning. We granted it before, and but it only ran with the particular person. Now we're being asked to make it run with the building. That reduces the hazard that if the building changes, it might be different in terms of its retail use.
Well, right now, the resolution from 2003 states there won't be any structural alterations or exterior changes. And certainly, the exterior change couldn't happen without HPC approval because it is in an historic district. I think the difference for the applicant, what they're asking the board to do that's different, is simply, it was approved in 2003 for a interior design office, but it was limited to that particular owner and tenant. So the request, that's why this owner's back, because they had to come back. They couldn't operate under the prior resolution given its language. And what they're asking me this time is, would you allow it to run with the land, which is normally how a variance would operate. It will run with the land. So,
My thinking is we might be able to do that. I think the wording of the old 203, the lead-in to the conditions is not consistent, where it only grants a variance, but then in Part A, it really describes a limited variance. And if you call in the lead-in section that we grant a limited variance as defined in Part A, in my thinking, that works, and that could run with the land.
Mr. Tar, I think we're all on the same page. What Mr. Floyd is saying is that he likes the wording in paragraph A of the 2003 resolution, and I think that is consistent with what you're asking for tonight.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. I've got a planner on either side of me saying, this is an accessory use to the primary use within the space. The zoning officer deals with this 5 times a day. People come in and say, I want to do this in a building where, and that's his job, to interpret the ordinance to determine whether that successive user falls under the umbrella of the one that was approved. Our problem was that the earlier guy was cut off, so there was nothing to piggyback on.
And I think it makes sense that if the board approves it, the resolution would make clear that it is accessory to an interior design office, that there's not going to be a freestanding showroom should the property change hands.
Exactly right.
So I think
we can frame that once decided. So let us decide what we want to do. And we've incorporated, it seems to me, paragraph A of the previous one into whatever we say we're up to. Basically, it will run with the property unless there's a change in intensity of use or something like that. So what do we think? I mean, this seems reasonable?
I think I'm very comfortable with it. It's
Yeah.
consistent with previous approvals, and I have no problem with it.
Any other comments?
I think I support it,
You support it? You think
due
it's
to
a
the
sensible idea?
very low intensity of the use,
Mhm.
which is what the town wants. So it's the benefit. You could probably have a higher office use that would exceed that activity. So I think it's fine.
Mr. Tannenbaum, any comments?
I support it.
Okay.
I was thinking, when I first saw this, I was thinking of Michael Graves' offices that were, I think...
They're right adjacent to it on the same side. I think it's got a showroom downstairs in which you can buy some of his stuff.
There used to be one on the first floor.
Yep.
I don't know, I
Still there.
think you find it came across the street, but at any rate...
Well, he's got...
This seems quieter to me than anything,
Yeah.
if that's our concern.
Yeah, I think there's an analogous one in the Graves.
Sort of.
Yeah. Okay then, so we need a motion and a seconder, and we can vote.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application, and obviously consistent with running with the land.
Okay. A seconder for that motion?
Second.
Do we have a motion and a seconder? You want to call the roll for us?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Colson? Yes. Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Callaghan?
Yes.
Mr. Tennant?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Thank you. It's approved.
Thank you very much.
Good. All right. So I don't think we have any other business, so we are adjourned.